Every collapse begins quietly, not with headlines or alarms, but with ordinary people noticing their lives getting just a little harder each month. A mother standing in the supermarket, realizing her usual groceries now cost $20 more. Welcome to Wealth Woven, the place where the past and the present collide to reveal the hidden forces that shape our financial lives. A young couple looking at their rent renewal and feeling their stomach drop. A father staring at the heating bill, wondering how it doubled without warning. A cashier checking their bank balance twice because their money feels thinner, lighter, worth less. These moments rarely make the news, but they are the first cracks in a nation's foundation. And right now, the cracks in the United Kingdom are stretching into fractures. While America's middle class is stabilizing, some even thriving, Britain's middle class is quietly drowning, one family at a time, one bill at a time, one sacrifice at a time. Today, we break down the hidden economic wounds pushing the UK toward a life it never expected, and the United States is pulling away fast. To understand the widening gulf between the UK and the US, you have to start with the wound that touches every household first: inflation. Not the temporary kind politicians promise will vanish, but the relentless, grinding kind that eats a nation from the inside. In America, inflation surged in 2022, but it broke. It fell quickly. Wages rose, prices stabilized, the middle class regained oxygen. But in the UK, inflation didn't ease, it hardened. It embedded itself into the cost of everything: bread, milk, petrol, electricity, repairs, insurance, childcare, rent. Even when global prices corrected, British prices refused to fall. This is what economists call sticky inflation. But to families, it feels like permanent suffocation. The US adapted. The UK absorbed the blow and then absorbed another. The average American today feels a slight upward drift: better job prospects, higher wages, improved spending power. The average Brit feels the opposite: a slow downward slide into a more expensive life with no raise, no relief, no catching up. This is where the divergence truly began. Because inflation doesn't just raise costs, it lowers hope, it shrinks ambition, it rewrites the meaning of middle class. And the worst part? The US inflation wasn't caused by overspending. It was caused by deep structural weaknesses that haven't been fixed, which means the pain isn't over. It's the opening act. But inflation is only the first wound. Part 2 exposes the financial trap that is quietly destroying British paychecks, and it asks something Americans almost never face. If inflation is the fire burning Britain's economy, the living cost trap is the smoke that chokes every household silently. It is the force that drains British paychecks before they even reach the bank. And unlike the US, where wages stretch further, goods are cheaper, and essentials stabilize faster, the UK is sinking under a cost structure that simply does not make sense anymore. This is where the UK's economic reality becomes brutally clear. In America, a middle-class worker pays for rent, food, utilities, and still has room left for savings, investments, or at least breathing space. In Britain, the same worker pays the same list of bills and ends the month with nothing, or worse, less than nothing. Groceries are higher, petrol is higher, childcare is astronomical, transport is slow, overpriced, and unavoidable, energy bills are volatile, taxes are heavier, and wages sit still like a ghost from 2010. The result is a financial suffocation that has nothing to do with bad budgeting and everything to do with a system mathematically designed to squeeze the average worker. But the real nightmare shows up in the stories of people who should be comfortable: teachers, nurses, IT workers, civil servants, now choosing between heating and groceries. These aren't luxuries, these are basics. Meanwhile, Americans with similar jobs are upgrading cars, taking vacations, investing in 401ks, building emergency funds, and buying homes, things the British middle class used to consider standard life milestones. But here's the cold truth: the UK isn't just experiencing high costs. It's experiencing permanent cost inflation, a structural problem that no election, no speech, and no short-term policy can solve. And this permanent pressure forces British families into the next crisis, one far more terrifying than rising prices. Because when the cost of living crushes you, the dream of owning a home becomes a nightmare. Part 3 reveals the brutal housing trap that no American would ever tolerate. If you want to understand the true difference between the UK and the US, you only need to look at one thing: housing. Because in Britain, housing is no longer a dream, it's a punishment. The most basic path to stability, wealth, and security has become the most impossible goal for an entire generation. In America, buying a home is challenging but achievable. Houses cost roughly 4 to 5 times the average salary. Mortgages are fixed for 30 years. Monthly payments stay the same for decades, even when the world falls apart. In Britain, none of that exists. The average home now costs 8 to 10 times the average salary. In London, it's 15 to 20 times. This isn't a ladder, it's a cliff. A person can work full-time for 10 years and not even save the deposit required. And even if they manage to buy, the nightmare is only beginning. Because the UK mortgage system is not built to protect families, it's built to expose them. Instead of a stable 30-year fixed rate, British homeowners get 2 to 5 year deals. After that, chaos. When interest rates rise, Americans stay safe. Brits lose everything. In the last 2 years, thousands of families saw their mortgage payments jump from $900 a month to $1,100. But if you think the UK housing disaster is bad, wait until you see Dublin, Europe's future warning. Part 4 exposes the collapse happening right next door. If the UK housing market feels impossible now, then Dublin shows you what happens when the situation evolves from crisis to partial full collapse. Because Dublin isn't struggling, it's drowning. It is what a country looks like when wages, housing, and policy collide into a perfect storm that destroys the middle class from the inside out. And the most terrifying part? Britain is following the same path step by step. In Dublin, rents aren't just high, they're unlivable, but the collapse doesn't end with housing. Part 5 reveals how Europe's industrial powerhouse, Germany, fell into crisis, and why the UK is next in line. To understand where the UK is heading, you must look at Germany, the nation once considered Europe's indestructible economic engine. Germany was not just strong, it was unstoppable. Precision engineering, world-class manufacturing, booming exports, its products powered the global economy. But today, the German machine is sputtering, collapsing under pressure, and revealing a terrifying truth. Even the strongest economies can fall when their foundations are neglected. Germany's downfall began with one fatal dependency: cheap Russian gas. For decades, German factories ran on low-cost energy, giving them a massive competitive advantage. But when that supply vanished, everything changed overnight. Energy-intensive industries, steel, chemicals, automotive manufacturing, were blindsided. Costs exploded. Entire plants became unprofitable. Companies like BASF, the pride of German industry, began moving operations abroad, abandoning the homeland they once helped build. Jobs disappeared. Regions hollowed out. The industrial backbone of Europe cracked. And here in S where Britain must pay attention, Germany's decline didn't start with energy. It started with complacency, with believing economic strength could last forever without renewal, with assuming old industries would always keep producing, even as the world shifted. The UK is now making the same mistake, but with even fewer industrial assets to lose. While America is building microchip fabs, energy grids, AI hubs, and manufacturing plants, Britain is losing factories, losing workers, and losing competitive ground. Germany had a massive industrial base to cushion the fall. Britain does not. If Germany is Europe's industrial heart, the UK is becoming its service sector limb, easy to injure, difficult to repair. Germany's crisis is not a German story, it is a Western warning, and the UK is standing in that warning's shadow. But Germany's collapse is only one piece of the picture. The deeper threat to Britain lies within its own population. Part 6 exposes the demographic implosion reshaping the country's future. Every great economic collapse begins not with money, but with people, or rather with the absence of people. And this is the wound that almost no one in the UK wants to talk about. Britain is running out of workers. Not today, not tomorrow. But the trend is locked in, and demographic decline is one of the few economic forces that cannot be reversed in a single generation. The ratio of workers to retirees is shrinking at a pace Britain cannot sustain. Fewer people working means fewer taxpayers. Fewer taxpayers means fewer funds for pensions, healthcare, and public services. Meanwhile, the population that depends on those services, especially the elderly, is growing rapidly. This is the exact demographic death spiral Japan entered decades ago. But here's the difference. Japan compensated with massive productivity and world-leading industry. Britain does not have that cushion. And then comes the second part of the crisis, the talent drain. Young, educated Britons are leaving, not temporarily, not for fun, but permanently. They're fleeing to the US, Canada, Australia, Germany, the UAE, anywhere that offers affordable housing, higher salaries, better healthcare, and greater opportunity. The UK is losing nurses to Australia, engineers to Canada, IT specialists to the US, hospitality workers to Europe, and researchers to anywhere with funding. A country cannot compete globally when its most skilled citizens pack their bags. This is not a small crack. It's a structural fracture. And for every worker that leaves, the burden on those who stay grows heavier. More taxes, more pressure, more strain. The system creaks. Meanwhile, the US, Britain's main comparator, has rising birth rates, massive immigration, and a huge young workforce feeding its economic engine. Britain's demographic map is shrinking. America's is expanding. But the demographic collapse is only half the disaster. Part 7 reveals how Britain's wages and purchasing power are being destroyed from the inside, If demographics explain why Britain is running out of workers, the salary crisis explains why the workers who remain feel poorer every single year. Because here is a truth that stings harder the more you stare at it. British salaries have completely lost their power. For decades, wages in the UK barely moved. They rose on paper, but fell in reality, because prices grew faster. The average Brit is earning more, but buying less. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the opposite happened. In the US, wage growth outpaced inflation. American workers regained spending power. Their paychecks stretched further, toward better homes, cheaper groceries, more savings, more opportunity. In Britain, a full-time worker can go the entire month without saving a single pound, not because they're irresponsible, but because the system drains their income before life even begins. An American teacher can afford a home and a car. A British teacher is calculating whether they can afford rent and groceries in the same week. An American nurse can build savings. A British nurse is debating picking up a second job just to survive. And here one's the brutal comparison. British workers earn salaries similar to Americans, but live like they re-earning half as much. Housing wipes out income. Transport drains the rest. Groceries cost more. Energy is unstable. Taxes are heavier. Essentials cost a premium because Britain imports so much. And because wages aren't rising with any real force, the British middle class is shrinking, not metaphorically, but mathematically. This isn't just a pay problem, it's a future problem. Low purchasing power destroys investment, reduces mobility, kills innovation, and erodes any chance of generational progress. And yet, salaries are only the surface, because the deepest wounds show up in places meant to protect people, not harm them. Part 8 uncovers the reality inside Britain's collapsing public services, starting with the NHS. A nation AES strength isn't equity measured only by GDP or wages. It is measured by how well it protects its people. And this is where the UK's decline becomes undeniable. Because the system meant to safeguard the population, the NHS, is collapsing in slow motion. The NHS was once the pride of Britain, a symbol of fairness, dignity, and national care. Today, it is overwhelmed, understaffed, and dangerously close to structural failure. Hospitals are full. Waiting lists stretch for months, sometimes years. Ambulances queue outside emergency rooms because there are no beds left inside. Doctors burn out. Nurses flee abroad. Patients suffer quietly, not because treatment doesn't exist, but because the system can no longer deliver it. Meanwhile, the United States, despite its complex healthcare system, has one advantage Britain envies: capacity. Americans can access specialists faster. Surgeries are scheduled sooner. Hospitals have more staff, more equipment, more funding. It isn't perfect, but it moves. The NHS, by contrast, feels frozen in time, sinking under the weight of a population it can no longer support. And the cracks go deeper. Britain's social care system is failing. Local councils are going bankrupt. Mental health services are stretched beyond recognition. GP appointments have turned into lotteries. These aren't isolated issues. They are symptoms of a nation whose tax base is too weak, workforce too small, wages too low, and costs too high to sustain the system it built decades ago. A collapsing healthcare system creates a collapsing nation. When people cannot get treatment, they cannot work. When they cannot work, they cannot contribute. When they cannot contribute, the economy weakens further. Britain is locked in a negative loop. But the darkest truth is this: the NHS crisis isn't even the final blow, because the next part reveals the most devastating force of all, the national identity crisis driving the UK into irreversible decline. Economic collapse is measurable: charts, graphs, statistics. But the collapse that hurts the most isn't economic, it's psychological. And this is the final wound hollowing out the UK from the inside. Britain has lost its sense of direction. For decades, the UK told itself a story of resilience, grit, and global leadership. Today, that story feels distant, like a memory fading faster each year. People don't feel represented. They don't feel protected. They don't feel heard. They don't feel hopeful. A country can survive inflation. It can survive low wages. It can survive a housing crisis. But no nation survives the moment its people stop believing in its future. And right now, Britain is drifting through a fog of uncertainty. Young people don't see opportunity. Workers don't see growth. Elderly citizens don't see stability. Families don't see progress. And businesses don't see a reason to stay. Meanwhile, America, despite its problems, still believes. Americans believe in mobility. They believe in second chances. They believe in reinvention. And belief is economic fuel. Belief creates investment. Belief creates innovation. Belief creates momentum. Britain, by contrast, is stuck between nostalgia and fear. Nostalgia for a past that isn't coming back. Fear of a future that feels increasingly unstable. This identity crisis feeds every other collapse. When people lose hope, they stop taking risks. When they stop taking risks, the economy loses energy. When the economy loses energy, decline becomes destiny. Nations rise because people believe they can. Nations fall because people believe they can't. And right now, Britain is dangerously close to the second category. But the story isn't over yet, because the final part reveals the crossroads Britain now faces, and which path could lead to revival or permanent collapse. Britain now stands at a moment that will define the next 50 years. A crossroads where one path leads to irreversible decline, and the other leads to a rebirth powerful enough to rewrite the nation. Doom's story. The outcome isn't predetermined. Collapse is not guaranteed. But neither is recovery. The United Kingdom is caught in a spiral. Wages too low, costs too high, public services overwhelmed, talent fleeing, industries shrinking, demographics weakening, and national confidence evaporating. If nothing changes, the future is clear. A slow, quiet fall. Not dramatic, not sudden, but steady. Year by year, opportunity narrowing. Year by year, the middle class thinning. Year by year, the country becoming a place people leave rather than a place people run toward. But there is another path. A path where Britain confronts its broken systems with honesty. A path where housing becomes attainable. Wages rise with dignity. The NHS receives structural rescue. Industry is rebuilt. Energy becomes affordable. And young people are given a reason to stay and a future worth fighting for. A path where the country stops surviving and starts building again. Rebirth requires courage. Reinvention requires risk. Renewal requires leadership that doesn't just manage decline, but refuses to accept it. Britain can still rise. The question is whether it chooses to. The United States surged ahead because it moved fast when crisis hit. Britain slowed down. Now the race isn't against America, it's against time, and time is running out. If you followed this journey to the end, you already understand Britain's crisis better than most politicians. The real question now is yours. Do you believe the UK can climb back, or is this the beginning of the end? Let me know in the comments. And if you value deep, fearless analysis like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Wealth Woven. Bigger stories, sharper insights, and the next chapters of global change are coming. Stay tuned.